Welcome to our deep dive into the future of transportation. Specifically, how self-driving cars are going to reshape the world. The source material for this deep dive is a report from RethinkX called Rethinking Transportation.
Yeah, this report really dives deep into this coming disruption, focusing on the shift to transportation as a service, or TaaS.
Okay, Cass, we've heard the term, but what does it actually mean, for our daily lives?
So imagine summoning a self-driving electric vehicle whenever you need it, like Uber, but without a driver and much cheaper.
Oh, wow.
That's essentially what TaaS is all about.
So does this mean owning a car will become obsolete?
Well, the report makes some pretty mind-blowing predictions.
Okay.
It claims that by 2030, 95% of U.S. passenger miles will be in on-demand autonomous electric vehicles, and those vehicles will be owned by fleets, not individuals.
95%. That's almost everyone. I can see how this could revolutionize transportation, but what makes TaaS so much cheaper than owning a traditional car?
Well, a few key factors drive the cost advantage. First, these autonomous electric vehicles, or AEVs as the report calls them, will have much higher utilization rates. They'll be on the road almost constantly, instead of sitting idle in a garage or parking lot for most of the day. That means each vehicle can generate significantly more revenue.
So more bang for the buck, basically.
Exactly. Plus, electric vehicles have significantly lower operating costs compared to gas-powered cars, no more trips to the gas station, fewer maintenance needs, and insurance costs are also expected to drop significantly.
That makes sense, but how does this translate to actual savings for the average person?
Well, the report states that the average American family could save over $5,600 per year by switching to TaaS. Think of it this way. That's like getting a 10% raise just from changing the way you get around.
No, $5,600. Suddenly this doesn't seem like some far-off futuristic idea. That kind of savings could really make a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. And when you multiply those savings across millions of households, you're talking about a massive economic shift. The report estimates that the shift to TaaS could free up $1 trillion in consumer spending annually.
$1 trillion. Now that's a number that's hard to wrap your head around. But okay, let's assume people aren't spending all that extra cash on self-driving joyrides. What happens to all those industries built around traditional car ownership? I'm thinking car manufacturers, dealerships, gas stations.
You're hitting on a crucial point. This is a systemic change that will impact everything from oil production to urban planning. For example, the report predicts that global oil demand will plummet as electric vehicles become the norm. They project a 30% decrease in demand within a decade.
A 30% drop in demand. That's a huge hit to the oil industry. What does that do to prices?
Well, the report estimates that oil prices could crash to as low as $25 per barrel. That would be a massive blow to oil-producing countries and companies.
So gas stations as we know them might become a thing of the past.
It's certainly a possibility. The entire oil value chain, from exploration and production to refineries and pipelines, will be completely upended.
Okay, we're talking about a transportation revolution here, but what about the car industry itself? Won't car manufacturers simply shift to making electric vehicles?
They'll certainly try, but the report predicts a 70% drop in new vehicle sales by 2030. That's because the way we buy and own cars is going to change drastically.
So instead of buying a car that sits idle most of the time, we'll be subscribing to transportation services that provide us with access to a shared fleet of autonomous vehicles.
Precisely. And this shift will have a ripple effect on all those businesses tied to traditional car ownership dealerships, mechanics, insurance companies, even parking garages.
It sounds like a lot of industries are in for a rude awakening. But I have to believe there will be some winners in this shakeup too, right?
Of course, while some sectors will shrink, others will flourish. The companies that can capitalize on the emerging TaaS market will be the ones that thrive.
So it's a case of adapt or die.
In a way, yes. But with disruption comes opportunity. Think about the new industries that will emerge. Companies that operate TaaS platforms, develop operating systems for autonomous vehicles, provide new mobility services. It's like the Wild West of the tech world, with entrepreneurs racing to stake their claim in this new frontier.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of excitement and potential for innovation here. But let's get back to the timeline. When will we start seeing these changes happen in a real, tangible way? Are we talking years, decades, or something in between?
Well, the report lays out a pretty aggressive timeline, with 2021 being the tipping point when TaaS is predicted to become cheaper than owning a car. We are living in that future right now.
Hold on, 2021, but that's practically yesterday. So we're not talking about some distant future here. This is happening now.
Yes. And once that cost advantage takes hold, the shift is expected to happen very quickly. Cities will adopt first, followed by the suburbs, and eventually even rural areas will be swept up in the change.
So no matter where you live, you won't be able to escape this self-driving revolution.
Pretty much. By 2030, the report estimates that most cars on the road will be AEVs. It's not just the vehicles that will change, though. The entire landscape of our cities will be transformed.
Now you're talking my language. What will these TUS-powered cities look like? Fewer cars, I assume.
Well, for starters, imagine streets with dramatically less traffic congestion. AEVs will coordinate their movements, optimizing routes and speeds to keep traffic flowing smoothly.
Rush hour, as we know it, could become a thing of the past. Now that would be a real game changer.
Exactly. And think about all the space currently dedicated to parking. As car ownership declines, we could reclaim those vast asphalt deserts and transform them into parks, housing, or other public spaces.
It's like our cities will finally have room to breathe again. But I have to ask, with all these self-driving cars on the road, won't there be a higher risk of accidents?
Actually, the opposite is true. The report predicts that the shift to AEVs could lead to a 90% reduction in accidents. Imagine a world with far fewer traffic fatalities and injuries. That's potentially 1.2 million lives saved globally every year.
Wow, 1.2 million lives. That's incredible. Not only will our cities be more beautiful and efficient, they'll also be much safer. But what about the environmental impact? Aren't we just shifting the pollution from our tailpipes to power plants?
That's a valid concern, but it's important to remember that the electricity powering these AEVs will increasingly come from renewable sources like solar and wind. The report estimates that we could see a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions from transportation. That's a huge step towards a more sustainable future.
Okay, you've painted a pretty compelling picture. This TAS thing really does sound like it has the potential to revolutionize our world in a positive way.
It certainly does, but it's important to remember that no technological disruption comes without its challenges. There will be job losses, potential for monopolies, and a host of other issues that we'll need to address as we transition to this new world.
You're right. It's not all sunshine and robot chauffeurs. But the potential benefits are so significant that it would be foolish to ignore this shift. We need to be prepared for the changes that are coming and hopefully harness this disruption to create a better future for everyone.
I couldn't agree more.
This deep dive has been a fascinating exploration of how self-driving cars and the rise of TAS are poised to reshape the way we live and move.
But we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in the Rethinking Transportation report.
In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into the report and uncover even more insights about this transportation revolution. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the future of transportation.
So we've established that self-driving cars and the shift to TAS are going to have a massive impact on the world. But what about the details? What kind of changes are we talking about on a more granular level?
Well, let's delve deeper into some of the specific shifts outlined in the Rethinking Transportation report. For example, we talked about the decline in new vehicle sales, but the report also provides projections for the overall composition of the vehicle fleet.
Interesting. So it's not just about fewer cars on the road, but also a shift in the types of vehicles will we see.
Exactly. Take a look at these projections for fleet size and composition in the U.S. By 2030, the number of passenger vehicles on American roads is expected to drop from 247 million to just 44 million. That's a massive decrease.
Wow, that's almost 80% fewer cars. But I'm guessing those remaining vehicles won't all look like the gas guzzlers we see on the roads today.
You're right. The report predicts a dramatic shift from individually owned internal combustion engine vehicles to a mix of individually owned electric vehicles and a large number of AEVs in TAL's fleets. By 2030, AEVs could make up over 60% of the total vehicle fleet.
So even though people will still own cars, the vast majority of miles driven will be in these shared autonomous electric vehicles.
Precisely. And this shift will have a profound impact on the way the auto industry operates. With fewer new cars being sold, car dealerships will have to adapt or risk becoming obsolete.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a tough pill to swallow for an industry that's been built around selling new cars for over a century.
It certainly will be a challenge, and it's not just dealerships that will be affected. The entire ecosystem of businesses that support traditional car ownership will be disrupted.
Mechanics, auto parts stores, insurance companies, the list goes on.
Exactly. But remember, with disruption comes opportunity. While some sectors will shrink, others will flourish. Think about the companies that will emerge to manage these vast fleets of AEVs. They'll need specialized maintenance facilities, charging infrastructure, and sophisticated software to optimize vehicle utilization and routing.
So instead of taking your car to the local mechanic, you'll be relying on these specialized fleet management companies.
It's a likely scenario, and it highlights how the shift to TaaS will create entirely new industries and job opportunities. It's not just about replacing existing jobs, but creating new ones that we can't even fully imagine yet.
That's a good point. It's easy to focus on the potential job losses, but we shouldn't overlook the potential for new and innovative fields to emerge.
Absolutely. It's about adapting to a changing landscape and embracing the opportunities that come with it.
Okay, so we've talked about the economic implications and the impact on the auto industry. But what about the broader societal impact of TaaS? How will this technology change the way we live, work, and interact with our cities?
That's where things get really interesting. The report paints a fascinating picture of how TaaS could transform our urban environments. For example, imagine cities with dramatically less traffic congestion. With AEVs coordinating their movements and optimizing routes, traffic jams could become a thing of the past.
Oh, that would be a dream come true for anyone who's ever been stuck in rush hour traffic.
Yeah.
I can already feel my blood pressure dropping just thinking about it.
And it's not just about making commutes more pleasant. Think about the time and productivity that would be gained if people weren't spending hours each week stuck in traffic. That could have a significant impact on our economy and quality of life.
Right. It's like suddenly giving everyone a few extra hours in their day.
Yeah.
What about parking? Will we still need massive parking lots and garages if most people aren't owning cars?
That's another major shift we can expect to see. As car ownership declines, the need for parking will diminish dramatically. Imagine all that valuable urban space being freed up for other uses.
Parks, housing, community gardens. The possibilities are endless.
Exactly. And it's not just about repurposing existing parking spaces. TaaS could change the way we design cities from the ground up. Imagine urban areas where streets are designed primarily for pedestrians and cyclists, with AEVs seamlessly integrating into the flow of traffic.
It sounds like a city planner's dream. But wouldn't all these self-driving cars still pose a safety risk, especially for pedestrians and cyclists?
Actually, the report suggests the opposite. The shift to autonomous vehicles could lead to a dramatic reduction in accidents, making our streets safer for everyone. Remember those 1.2 million lives saved globally we talked about earlier?
Right. But how can we be sure that these self-driving cars will be safe enough to share the road with vulnerable road users? I mean, we've all seen those headlines about self-driving car accidents.
Oh, those incidents are certainly concerning, and it's important that we approach the development and deployment of autonomous vehicles with caution. But it's also important to remember that human error is a major factor in most traffic accidents today. AEVs are programmed to follow traffic laws and avoid risky maneuvers. As the technology matures, it's likely that self-driving cars will be far safer than human drivers.
Okay, I'm starting to see the potential here. But safety isn't the only concern. What about the environmental impact of all these electric vehicles? Won't we just be shifting the pollution from our tailpipes to power plants?
That's a valid concern, but it's important to consider the bigger picture. The electricity powering these AEVs will increasingly come from renewable sources, like solar and wind. The report predicts a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions from transportation, which would be a huge step toward a more sustainable future.
So cleaner air, fewer accidents, less traffic congestion. It sounds like TaaS could really transform our cities for the better.
It certainly has the potential to do so, but it's important to remember that technology is a tool, and it's up to us to use it wisely. We need to carefully consider the potential downsides of TaaS and implement policies that mitigate those risks.
Like what kinds of risks?
Well, for one thing, we need to ensure that the benefits of TaaS are shared equitably. We can't allow this technology to exacerbate existing inequalities. We need to make sure that everyone has access to affordable and reliable transportation, regardless of income or location.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. We can't create a transportation system that benefits only the wealthy or those living in certain areas. What about privacy concerns? With all these self-driving cars collecting data about our movements, won't that be a goldmine for marketers and potentially even governments?
You're raising another important issue. Data privacy will be a major consideration as TaaS becomes more prevalent. We need to establish clear guidelines and regulations to protect people's privacy and prevent the misuse of their data.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but also about the ethical and societal implications.
Exactly. We need to approach the development and deployment of TaaS with a holistic perspective, considering not just the technological advancements, but also the social, economic, and environmental impacts.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I'm starting to see how self-driving cars and the shift to TAs are not just about futuristic gadgets, but about a fundamental transformation of the way we live and move.
It's a paradigm shift that will touch every aspect of our lives. And we've only just begun to explore the ripple effects. There's so much more to unpack in the Rethinking Transportation report.
Well, on our next segment, we'll delve deeper into the report and explore some of the more unexpected implications of the TAS revolution. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the future of transportation.
So far, we've explored economic and societal impacts of self-driving cars and the shift to transportation as a service.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to uncover how this technology could reshape everything from our cities to our daily commutes.
But the Rethinking Transportation report doesn't stop there.
No. What else does it cover?
It delves into some of the geopolitical implications of this disruption, which are pretty mind-blowing.
Geopolitics. Okay, now you've really got my attention. I'm all ears.
Well, think about it. A massive drop in oil demand will inevitably, shake things up on the global stage.
Right, that makes sense. Oil has been a major factor in international relations for decades.
Exactly. And the report highlights that some oil-producing countries will be hit much harder than others.
I imagine those with higher production costs are the most vulnerable.
Precisely. Countries like the U.S., Canada, and Venezuela, which rely on expensive oil sources like shale and tar sands, will see a significant portion of their production become uncommercial.
So while oil giants in the Middle East might weather the storm, others will be left stranded.
That's a likely scenario. And this kind of economic upheaval could lead to political instability, social unrest, even conflict.
It's a sobering thought. The transition to a TAS-driven world could have unintended consequences that reach far beyond the realm of transportation.
Yeah, it's crucial to be aware of these potential risks and to plan accordingly. And it's not just about the countries that produce oil either.
What do you mean?
The countries that consume oil will also be affected just in different ways.
Can you give me an example?
Well, consider the U.S. Currently, energy security is a major factor in U.S. foreign policy.
We've seen that play out in the Middle East for decades.
Exactly. But if the U.S. becomes essentially independent of oil imports, as the report suggests, that strategic calculus will shift dramatically.
So the U.S. might be less inclined to intervene in conflicts in oil-rich regions.
That's one possibility, and this shift in U.S. foreign policy could have a ripple effect throughout the world, potentially altering alliances and creating new power dynamics.
Wow. It's amazing to think that something as seemingly simple as switching to self-driving electric cars could have such profound implications for global politics.
It really highlights how interconnected our world is and how seemingly isolated technological advancements can trigger a cascade of unforeseen consequences.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. But let's zoom back in a bit and talk about something a little less abstract. The batteries that power all these electric vehicles. Where are all those batteries going to come from?
That's another crucial aspect of the TAS revolution. The report dives into the materials needed for these batteries and raises some important points about supply and demand.
Okay, walk me through it.
The primary component of most EV batteries is lithium, and luckily it's a relatively abundant resource found in various parts of the world.
So no worries about running out of lithium anytime soon.
Well, not necessarily. While global reserves are substantial meeting, the rapidly growing demand for lithium-ion batteries will require significant investment in mining and production.
So it's a matter of scaling up production to keep pace with the electric vehicle boom.
Exactly. And this scaling up presents both opportunities and challenges. It could lead to economic growth in countries with large lithium reserves, but it also raises concerns about environmental impacts and responsible sourcing.
It's a classic case of weighing the benefits of a new technology against the potential costs.
Precisely. And beyond lithium, there are other materials involved in battery production that present their own set of challenges.
Such as?
The report specifically mentions cobalt, which is a key component in many lithium-ion batteries. The problem is that a large portion of the world's cobalt supply comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country with a history of conflict and instability.
So there are ethical concerns about sourcing cobalt from such a volatile region.
Absolutely. And this raises questions about the need for diversification of supply chains and responsible mining practices to ensure that the raw materials for our electric vehicle batteries are obtained ethically and sustainably.
Right. It's a reminder that even as we embrace the technological advances of the TAS revolution, we need to be mindful of the social and environmental implications.
Well said. It's about finding a balance between progress and responsibility, ensuring that the transition to a TAS-driven world benefits everyone, not just the select few.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey. We've gone from understanding the basics of self-driving cars to uncovering a whole system shift with massive economic, social, and even geopolitical implications.
You've summed it up perfectly. And remember, this report, Rethinking Transportation, is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a wealth of information out there for those who want to delve deeper into this topic.
It's a topic that's rapidly evolving and will undoubtedly continue to shape our world in profound ways for years to come.
Absolutely. And as you continue to explore this fascinating subject, here's a final thought for you to ponder. Knowing what you now know about the inevitability of this TAS disruption, what role will you play in this transportation revolution? Will you be an early adopter, an advocate for responsible implementation, or simply an observer? The choice is yours, but one thing is certain. The future of transportation is unfolding before our very eyes.
It's a future filled with both challenges and opportunities, and it's up to all of us to shape it in a way that benefits humanity and the planet. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone, and until next time, keep exploring.